I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday Tone Tip. On today's video, we're going to take a look at the public beta release for Firmware 9 on the Fractal FM9. And in the spirit of the number 9, I'm going to show you 9 really cool things that you can do with this new firmware. This is a massive update. There are significant improvements to some of the blocks. There's new block additions. There's new effect types in a bunch of blocks. There is a lot to take in. Also, if you are updating this, make sure you read the release notes and take a look at the specific instructions depending on the firmware that you are coming from. There's also just so many new features in here that it can be a little bit daunting. So I wanted to show you some of my personal highlights. Number one is this new Brit 800 Studio 20 amp and the updated Friedman BE models. Let's just hear those. And what I like about the updated Friedmans is the negative feedback control is now exposed on the main page. The stock value is somewhere up around 9, so we will start there and then I'll drop it down. But first, let's hear the Brit 800 Studio 20. This is based on a 20-watt Marshall SC20, like a 20-watt JCM 800. It's got that classic Marshall crunch, but with a little extra, almost Vox-like chime to it. I really like that. The Friedman is a lot smoother and meatier sounding. If you drop the negative feedback by about half, it takes on a little bit more of that like untamed Marshall thing. But if you like it tight, keep the negative feedback cranked. Been a while since I've revisited those Friedmans and I really like the way they are sounding. They're like a slightly more polished, mastered version of a Marshall. Thing number 2 that I think you will really like in here is the updated cab block room modeling. So if we go over to the room and air parameters over here, this room level in here is essentially going to be really handy if you're playing direct or you're playing with headphones and you want to take the directness out of the sound. You want a bit of space and depth, but you don't want to use a dedicated reverb block. I find that running it around 20% just adds a nice little bit of density to the overall sound. It's great for classic rock sounds too. I would personally run that around 10 to 15%. If you're going for more of an old school vibe though, run it up around 20 or 25%. That can get you around having to use a dedicated reverb for that room style sound on there. I'm going to turn this down to about 10% for the rest of this video. Thing number 3 is going to be the addition of a second multi-tap delay block in here. So being able to run not 1, but 2 multi-tap delays in here is pretty awesome. Let's go back to that Friedman model over here. And I've got both of these set up as quad chorus blocks, imitating the classic Yamaha SPX90 symphonic preset. If we go in and just do a little bit of a sneak peek of one of the new drives, this integral pre, that's going to give us a massive greasy rhythm tone. Alternatively, you could set up one of these as a chorus and the other as a delay. I've got channel B set up with the 1210 style chorus, and I've got channel B set up as the PCM circular delay on here. This one is really, really enjoyable. Check this out. This just makes your lead sounds massive. Next up, let's take a look at the updated and remastered compressor block. There are several new types in here, including several new versions of the dynamic comp. There is a Rockman compressor called the Rock Guy compressor, a very new tube compressor. The optical compressor has been updated. There's a VCA bus compressor. This sounds pretty amazing. I really like the new Dynacomp, especially cranking up the compression to get some squish out of it. Just bring the amp gain down a little bit on this one and use the middle position on this Les Paul. Furthermore, I really like running something like the JFET Studio compressor after the amp block, just to add that little bit of something to everything. Let's hear the Dynacomp first though. Another type that I like in front of the amp with the ratio turned up a little bit, the threshold turned down, and the level cranked is the optical compressor. This is a great alternative to using a drive pedal as a boost. You also notice that there is an emphasis control on this one and a drive control on several of the new types. Let's have a listen to what this does. I like this for single note lines. I really like doing with the JFET and optical types is running them after the amp and cab, adding a little bit of drive on there and setting them up so that I don't have a huge amount of gain reduction. But when I have my full-on cranked volume control on my guitar, not too much changes. When I roll my volume control back, the compressor is kind of going to make up for everything and fatten and sweeten it. the drive block has several new types. I'll just go through 4 of my favorite types. We looked at the integral pre, which is based on a TC Electronics integrated preamp. Running the bass low and the treble high on that one with the level all the way up is a great way to push an amp model into searing overdrive. I think, though, probably some of the most significant models are going to be these Pi Fuzz models and the Color Sound models. If you love David Gilmour, you love 70s rock or modern doom, these Pi Fuzzes are pretty amazing. There's tone and wicker switches on there which emulate popular mods to the Big Muff, but I just love being able to take this kind of bright, crunchy rock sound and transform it into an absolute doom machine. The Super Fuzz on there based on the old Univox Super Fuzz, which is just the most disgusting fuzzy octave up style effect. If you play on the neck pickup and roll your tone control down on there and play up high, it's like a demented version of the Octavia. We also heard the Colortone OD. There's a Colortone booster. There's various versions of classic Big Muff circuits in there. There's the MOSFET distortion based on the old Ibanez Mostortion. There's a 5-knob tube driver in there. Probably a bunch of stuff that I'm missing as well, but a great update to the drive block with several classic types added in there. Next, let's talk about some of the reverb updates. Any reverbs based on real spaces, so halls, chambers, rooms, mausoleums have all been updated to sound a little more realistic, and the spring reverbs have been updated, and there's this new Vibrato King custom spring. So let's do this. Let's just swap over to the Marble Hall. I feel like this is such a beautiful sounding reverb with a slightly cleaner amp. I'll just turn the gain down on this Brit Studio 20 down a bit and compensate by turning the treble down a little bit so it's not super bright on there. Let's just have a listen to the Marble Hall, then I will bring in that new spring reverb type on there. springs are delicious, and those large ambient spaces are so beautiful. If all this did was reverb, it would still be an absolutely classic processor, in my opinion. There was an update to the Univibe modeling in the phaser block as well, and there's this new type called Modern Vibe. I think just turning the rate up on this one gets you an instant vibe. Pardon the pun. A question that I get asked quite a bit on the FM9 is whether there is an auto wah, envelope filter, or touch wah. Well, you actually have all of those things in there. The touch wah got some updates in this firmware. What I really like is using the mix mode on here, turning the sensitivity up a little bit and using it with something like a Dynacomp. So you can set the detector source to either be the block input or input number 1, 2, or 3, because my guitar is going into input number 1, and I want to set this up so that it's responsive, but still after the compressor, I'll set it to input 1. This is a great funky sounding touch wah on there. The mix mode, I really dig the sound of. I think with the envelope filter or the auto wah, I like the classic resonant low pass filter, but try these settings. Now, one long-standing feature that I have loved about every Fractal product in the amp block is that you can do virtual mods in there. You have so much control over the way the amp models sound, and a real classic trick is to go to the preamp and swap out the Tonestack type in here. So I've got the FAS Brown set up, but there is a brand new Plexi Brown Tonestack. So this is going to be the Plexi, the old Marshall super lead from the late 60s, the values that Eddie Van Halen had in his late 60s Marshall Plexi. So for people who are really going for that last bit of extra detail, chasing that classic Brown sound, try the Plexi Brown Tonestack in a Plexi model. I like it with the FAS Brown in here. There's such a great sounding amp model, and I'll kick on a little bit of that 1210 style chorus and a circular delay in just a second, but let's hear this straight up. Great sounding amp model. I love it with this Tonestack type. I hope you enjoyed this highlights reel of Firmware 9. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments section below. Feel free to weigh in with any suggestions for future episodes in this series. Otherwise, go and play your guitars and make some wonderful noises with your Fractal. I'm going to turn all of these blocks on, and this is either going to be the worst sounding guitar sound you've ever heard, or it might be slightly cool with a compressor into a touch wah, into a Univibe, into a fuzz, into a spring reverb, a really gainy amp, a post-amp compressor, a symphonic style chorus, and I'm going to turn on that Marble Hall reverb just so we have a massive reverb. If it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing, right? See you all on the next one.